Some games don't fall because they're bad. They fail because the world never gave them a chance. Bad timing, broken launches, hype that turned into hate overnight. And once the internet decides a game is dead, it rarely gets a second life. But here's the uncomfortable truth: some of the best games ever made were labeled flops, ignored, mocked, forgotten. And the first game on this list proves how unfair the industry can be. Because this game didn't just flop, it was buried before players even touched the controller. And once you hear why, you'll never look at game launches the same way again. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy was judged before it even launched, not because it was bad, not because anyone played it, but because another game poisoned everything. After the collapse of Marvel's Avengers, trust was gone. Players were tired, angry, done with Marvel games. So when Guardians was announced, the reaction wasn't curiosity, it was rejection. Not again. This will flop. Another disaster. But listen to this. The game wasn't live service. It wasn't broken. It wasn't greedy. It was story-driven, character-focused, full of heart. The dialogue felt alive. The relationships mattered. The soundtrack hit at the perfect moments. And yet, almost nobody noticed. Why? Because the internet had already decided. By the time reviews praised it, by the time players who tried it started defending it, the damage was done. Sales were weak, hype was gone, the label was permanent. And this is where it gets scary. Because Guardians wasn't the biggest flop on this list, the next game failed even harder. And the fallout was unlike anything the industry had ever seen. Cyberpunk 2077 didn't just flop, it exploded. This game promised the future, a living city, endless freedom, the next evolution of gaming. And for a moment, everyone believed. Trailers looked unreal. Expectations went through the roof. Hype reached levels the industry hadn't seen in years. Then launch day arrived, and everything went wrong. Bugs everywhere, crashes nonstop, characters breaking, missions falling apart. On some consoles, the game was barely playable. The internet went wild. Refunds, outrage, memes everywhere. And just like that, Cyberpunk became a joke, a warning, a failure. But here's the part most people missed. The developers didn't walk away. They stayed. Update after update, system reworks, gameplay rebuilt from the ground up, Night City slowly transformed. What was once broken became immersive, emotional, alive. Players who returned discovered something shocking, a deep story, unforgettable characters, moments that stick with you long after the screen goes dark. Today, Cyberpunk isn't the game people mocked. It's a comeback story. But listen closely, most players never went back. They judged it once, and that was enough. And what comes next proves that sometimes a game can be too ambitious for its own time. Because the next title didn't fail from bugs, it failed because people didn't understand it. Quantum Break didn't fail because it was bad. It failed because it was too different. Back in 2016, players wanted simple: shoot, progress, repeat. Quantum Break didn't do that. It mixed gameplay with a live-action TV series. You played a chapter, then watched the consequences unfold on screen. And for most people, that felt weird, confusing, unnecessary, so they walked away. But listen to this. Underneath that risky idea was a story about time collapsing, choices reshaping reality, characters trapped in moments they couldn't escape. The performances were strong, the time powers felt insane. The tension kept rising with every chapter, but the idea was ahead of its time. Marketing didn't explain it well. Players didn't understand what they were buying. And once confusion sets in, interest dies. Today, people look back and realize something shocking. If Quantum Break released now, with today's audience, with today's storytelling trends, it would be praised. Instead, it became forgotten. And this is where it gets sad. Because the next game didn't fail from confusion or ambition. It failed because people mistook emotion for weakness. And what happened next? Hit harder than anyone expected. The Last Guardian wasn't rejected because it lacked beauty. It was rejected because it demanded patience. And patience is rare. After nearly 10 years in development, expectations were insane. Players wanted perfection, polish, smooth controls. What they got instead felt slow, frame drops, unresponsive moments, a creature that didn't always obey. And that's when the complaints started. This is broken. The controls are bad. This game is frustrating. But listen to this. Trico wasn't supposed to act like a machine. He wasn't programmed to instantly obey commands. He was meant to feel alive, curious, stubborn, scared. The game wasn't about winning fights, it was about building trust. Every hesitation mattered, every small interaction counted, and slowly, something rare happened. Players who stayed began to care, not for mechanics, not for graphics, but for the bond, the silence, the glances, the moments where Trico protected you without being told. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, it was emotional. And that's why so many people misunderstood it. They rushed it, they fought it, they tried to control it instead of feeling it. Today, many who return realize the truth. This wasn't a flawed game, it was a delicate experience released in an impatient world. And what comes next proves that sometimes a game doesn't need emotion to be misunderstood. Sometimes all it takes is one bad decision before launch, because the next game on this list failed before players even knew what it was. Prey was doomed the moment its name was revealed, not because of gameplay, not because of quality, but because people thought it was something it wasn't. When players heard Prey, they expected a sequel, a continuation, something familiar. Instead, they got a completely new game. Confusion hit instantly. So, what is this? Is this connected or not? Why does it look nothing like the original? Marketing failed to explain it. Expectations collapsed, and interest vanished fast. But listen to this. Underneath that confusion was one of the most immersive experiences of its generation. A space station that felt alive, quiet, isolated, watching you. Every room told a story. Every shadow felt dangerous. Every object could be a weapon or a trap. Enemies didn't just attack you, they deceived you. A coffee mug, a chair, a harmless object, until it moved. Combat wasn't about reflexes, it was about thinking, planning, adapting. You weren't told how to solve problems, you were trusted to figure them out. And then there's the ending. No spoilers, but it's the kind that sticks with you, the kind that makes you stare at the screen in silence. Today, people call Prey a hidden gem, a cult classic, an experience ahead of its time. But back then, it was ignored, overshadowed by bigger releases, crushed by bad marketing, forgotten before it had a chance to breathe. And what comes next proves something brutal. Because the next game didn't fail from confusion. It failed because technical problems drowned out everything else. And the internet showed no mercy. Star Wars Jedi Survivor should have been a victory lap. The first game built trust. Fans were excited, expectations were high, then launch day arrived, and everything fell apart. Frame drops, stuttering, crashes, performance so bad that players couldn't ignore it. The internet did what it always does. Clips went viral, anger exploded, and the word unplayable spread faster than the truth. But listen to this. Behind those technical issues was an incredible game, a darker story, a more broken hero, a galaxy that finally gets dangerous. Combat was deeper, movement was smoother, exploration was wider and more rewarding. This wasn't just a sequel, it was growth. Cal wasn't the same Jedi anymore. He was tired, haunted, questioning everything. The story took risks, emotional risks. Moments hit harder than anyone expected. Relationships mattered, loss felt real. But none of that mattered at launch, because performance problems drowned everything else out. Even after patches fixed most issues, even after the game became stable, people didn't return. They had already made up their minds. And that's the cruel pattern in gaming. First impressions don't fade. Headlines don't get updated. Reputations stick. And that leads to one final thought. Because when you look at all these games together, you start to see the real problem. And the conclusion ties everything together in a way that might change how you judge games forever. Because sometimes the biggest failure isn't the game, it's us. When you look at all these games together, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. They didn't fail because they lacked passion. They didn't fail because they lacked vision. They failed because of timing, because of expectations, because first impressions turned into permanent labels. Once the internet decides a game is bad, it stops listening. Updates don't trend. Fixes don't go viral. Comebacks don't erase headlines. And that's the real loss. Not the sales numbers, not the reviews, but the experiences players never had, the stories they never felt, the moments they never lived. Because some games aren't meant to be judged in the first week, they're meant to be discovered slowly. So the next time a game launches broken, or different, or misunderstood, maybe don't ask, is this a flop? Ask this instead. What if I'm missing something? If this video made you rethink even one game, hit subscribe and comment below. Which game do you think flopped, but was actually perfect? Because there are way more stories like these. And this was only a part one.